Europe has been left scrambling after US President-elect Donald Trump would not rule out using military means to acquire the Arctic island of Greenland. Not only does this present a danger to the Danish kingdom, but also an existential threat to the powerful NATO military alliance. My name is Angela Scoogens. This is the TVP World Brussels studio, and I'm joined by my guest, Shea, who is a former NATO official and now is a senior fellow of the Friends of Europe think tank in Brussels. He is here to explain what this all really means for Europe and transatlantic relations. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, and thanks for having me today.
Thank you for coming on. So I've just explained to you a little bit about what Donald Trump has said in terms of what he wants with Greenland. You've been in this game for a very, very long time. What is your read on this situation? Is he serious?
I think the answer to that is yes and no. He's not serious to the extent that the US troops are going to be parachuted into Greenland tomorrow, organise a coup d'etat and take control of Greenland and provoke a crisis with NATO, particularly Denmark, of course, which has sovereignty over Greenland. I think that's an exaggeration. It's bluster. Trump likes to be provocative. He likes to keep people guessing. It's part of his style. But yes, it is serious to the extent that it's not the first time Trump has spoken about Greenland. He also made an offer to Denmark to purchase Greenland when he was first there. So it's a consistent theme. He didn't pluck it out of nowhere. There is a history of the United States trying to acquire Greenland. US President Harry Truman, after World War II, made an offer of $100 million, which was rejected. So there has been a US strategic interest in Greenland for a long time. I think, and this is the third comment, that what we see with Trump is that he wants to sort of reassert American influence, American power in the hemisphere, because this has to be seen in the light of a statement he made about taking back control of the Panama Canal, yes. The statements about renaming the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America, for instance, the cartoons that he likes to put up on his Truth social media site showing Canada as the 51st state yes. of the United States. So it's a pattern where Trump is going back to, if you're a historian, you'll recognize this, the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, when America said to other powers, keep out. This is sort of our backyard, and we're going to have the major influence here. Now, back in 1823, it was keep out to France and my country, the United Kingdom. Today, it's keep out, I think, to China in particular and Russia. So I don't think there's going to be an American invasion of Greenland. America already has troops and a military base in Greenland in any case, so it's already there. But I do think that sort of Trump is signaling that he's going to push back at what he sees as growing Russian and Chinese influence in that part of the world, the Arctic, and also further south of the Rio Grande in Latin America overall.
And it's okay, so if he doesn't want to actually take Greenland, I mean, we're hearing some people suggest that he could potentially just acquire a lease for territory there. Is that on the cards? Is that kind of what you think he could be angling for, aside from him wanting to assert a kind of defence against Russia and China in the Northern Hemisphere?
Well, certainly he's interested in the economic assets of Greenland because Greenland has enormous deposits of gas, oil, but also rare earths and precious metals. And of course, at the moment, the United States is getting many of these, most of them, in fact, from China. And Trump is interested in diversifying the American supply chain, but which is, by the way, also a European interest. It's an EU interest as well to cut dependency on China. But the EU has the advantage of a large mine being recently discovered in Sweden, whereas, of course, Trump has to look closer to home for these precious metal deposits and rare earths. And certainly, yes, Greenland, Denmark and the United States could have a partnership agreement when it comes to exploration. The polar ice pack is now melting, as we all know, in the wake of climate change. So this makes drilling more economically viable. But of course, there are also environmental concerns too for the Greenlanders and for Denmark. But yes, you could certainly have these kind of partnership agreements. For example, the United States, with three islands in the Pacific, including the Marshall Islands, doesn't have formal sovereignty over those islands. They're not part of the United States, but it does have these kind of partnership, long-term partnership economic agreements, and something similar could be worked out for Greenland, particularly if Greenland becomes independent, because at the moment the Greenland under the Danish constitution has an option to move towards independence if that's what the Greenlanders desire, just like they withdrew from the EU back in 1985. So I don't think this is something that can be sort of concocted immediately, but it's something for the long-term future. And also the United States could say, we would like, in view of the strategic situation, more Russian-Chinese military activity in the Arctic, we'd like to have a bigger base in Greenland, put more American aircraft there, and I imagine those things are perfectly negotiable. So there is a serious part of this. Unfortunately, it tends to get a bit overshadowed by the bluster and the hyperbole and the rhetoric of military invasions or we want to buy Greenland. By the way, when the United States bought Alaska, back in 1867 from the Russians, it paid only $7 million because nobody knew that Alaska had oil and gas. Otherwise, the price would have been a lot higher. But we all know that Greenland does have these things. So even if Trump wanted to buy Greenland, he might not be able to afford it if it came with a realistic price tag.
Okay, let's wind it back a bit. If Donald Trump doesn't buy Greenland, which is probably not going to happen, but as you said, it has happened in the past with US history. If he does use military means to invade Greenland, how established is the Danish defensive systems to repel an attack like that? Is their military, can it withstand a US aggression?
Well, this is what, when I was NATO spokesman a few years back, we called a hypothetical question. And part of me wants to not answer a hypothetical question because I genuinely believe that it's not going to happen. I think what Trump likes to do, and we saw another example of this last week when he said that NATO allies should now spend 5% of their GDP on defence, which even the United States does not spend. What Trump likes to do is to start, if you like, a negotiation with some, ridiculous, unrealistic sort of proposal, invade Greenland, which is not going to happen. But he does it to sort of put the thing on the agenda, shake people up, recognise that he wants to bring about some kind of strategic change, but then at the end of the day we get a more realistic, more modest result. So I still think this is a hypothetical question. I also think that Trump would think twice before becoming the first NATO country to invade another NATO country. That hasn't happened in NATO's history, and it would really be a terrible danger for the alliance. I don't think it would be in the American interest. And Trump, although he is a very powerful person, can't do everything by himself. There's Congress, there's the American legal apparatus, there are advisors, and I think there will be lots of people saying to him, look, Mr. President, this is not a good idea at all. So I really think that this is in the realm of the hypothetical, but obviously the United States is a major military power. Denmark has a very small presence on Greenland because it respects the autonomy of Greenland. It's mainly sort of military special forces ice patrols to keep an eye on things in general, but it's not a large military presence. The United States has a much larger military presence, paradoxically, on Greenland than the sovereign power Denmark. So on paper, yes, but again, I come back to the point that I think that it's idle and to some degree irresponsible to speculate on this because, to my mind, it's not going to happen.
And is this why you think that NATO and Mark Rutte, the top boss, have been a little bit tight-lipped on commenting on the matter? Because we haven't really seen any comments by either of them speaking about this. I know that the European Commission also did not want to comment on this, but Ursula von der Leyen recently made a comment. And I mean, I'm asking you this because you were in NATO. If they don't want to comment, what do you think is happening internally? What are the discussions that they could be having around this?
Well, I think We're a couple of days away, of course, from January the 20th and the inauguration of Donald Trump. And we know that this is obviously going to be a more turbulent period, at least initially, in the transatlantic relationship. Tariffs, 5% defense spending in NATO, less American military assistance to Ukraine, for instance, a peace agreement in Ukraine which may not be in the Ukrainian interest and give too much away to Putin. We're in a moment of uncertainty, of course, at the moment. And so nobody wants to needlessly provoke Donald Trump at the very, very beginning of his administration to alienate him, to cause more rifts in the transatlantic relationship than we have already at a particularly delicate time. So I think if you're a European leader like the Secretary General of NATO or the President of the European Commission, you're going to choose your battlegrounds wisely and not go in across the board, particularly in areas which are clearly, to my mind, simply meant as provocative statements. You know, you have to distinguish between where Trump is really serious and on what is particularly serious. In my mind, this is about, you know, more US economic activity in Greenland, more focus on the Arctic, looking at what we can do to contain Chinese and Russian influence in that hemisphere in general, and not about, you know, as I said, American parachutists arriving in Greenland tomorrow. So try to distinguish between, you know, what's rhetoric, provocative, and where we may see a policy shift. And of course, as far as NATO is concerned, keeping the US engaged on Ukraine. There was a meeting in Ramstein yesterday, obviously, of this group that supplies military equipment. In the EU, it's diffusing any trade war at the moment, but also preparing to respond. Those are, I think, the more urgent sort of battlegrounds, because we don't know what's going to happen. You've got to remember that we've been dealing basically with an election campaign. Trump is not yet in the White House, and he's still in campaign mode when it comes to, you know, pleasing the base, you know, being provocative, freewheeling. But once he's in the White House, and once people like Elon Musk are in proper government positions, they're subject to a much greater discipline. They're subject to the laws of the real world. They're no longer campaigning. And I think people want to wait and see how that transition is crossed before they start picking fights with the United States. So again, pick your battlegrounds carefully.
I see what you mean. So should we wait until he's actually sworn into office to get a proper comment or stance from NATO? Because, as you're saying, what we're hearing is they don't want to make any comments yet before he's taken office. They're waiting for him to present his agenda. But I mean, once he does that, will NATO respond to what he's saying? Because these are quite, I know that some people don't really take him seriously, but others do. And, you know, I know the Danish opposition certainly do. And they're taking this not just as political posturing, but as a threat.
Yes, as I've said, when Trump comes back to themes repeatedly, and Greenland, like Panama, are things that he's been tackling for some time, his unhappiness with Canada, with the trade deficit that the Canadians have with the US, the migration issue, the cross-border drugs issue, these are themes that we know are going to resonate with him. So there will be some action. But we already see, I think, the dawn of realism. For example, look at tariffs, where now Trump is no longer saying 25% tariffs on everyone. He's saying, well, the tariffs may be delayed. They'll only be on certain items, for instance. He's interested in free trade agreements, potentially. We're not hearing the same thing now. And another thing, Ukraine, where the Trump special envoy on Ukraine, General Keith Kellogg, is now saying, no, we're not going to take 24 hours. We can't do that. Nobody believed it in any way to get a peace. But we're now going to present a plan in 100 days. So clearly, you know, the discipline of power, what's possible, what's not possible, the consequences that, you know, if you start a trade war, American goods and services are going to lose markets. If you kick all illegal migrants out of the United States, even Elon Musk is against that policy, because then a lot of people who work in American agriculture, a lot of people who work on American assembly lines, a lot of talented people that Elon Musk needs for Tesla and SpaceX are also going to be denied visas to the United States. You know, we're seeing different camps already in the Trump administration according to which particular economic interest you represent. So let's wait for the whole thing to settle, not overreact, but be prepared. Yes, be prepared, because clearly there could be things that Trump does that would not be in Europe's interest. We hear a lot, for example, particularly from Poland at the moment, about, you know, more European self-reliance in defence, more investment in defence industry, for example, and so on. But you know, it's good to sort of have all of your options ready to go in. But let's hope that the worst, actually, at the end of the day, doesn't happen, because, you know, a person once many years ago said, you know, that the most formidable power in the world was the power of the financial markets, that you could defeat any power except the power of the financial markets. And the market discipline on bad economic policies is something that I think Trump will also have to take account of as he goes forward.
Okay, I guess it's a waiting game for us. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, Jamie.
Thank you. Again, a pleasure.
And thank you so much for watching. My name is Angela Scoogens. Make sure that you stick around and continue watching TVP World as more news, commentary and analysis are coming up. See you next time.